Hello, this is Mrs. Brown with Research Triangle High School, and welcome to your first video for AP Language and Composition. The purpose of this is to give you an introduction to what we mean by rhetoric and argument, and to identify 3 specific things that you can look for whenever you're creating an argument or analyzing someone else's argument. The first thing I'd like to do is just kind of define this idea of rhetoric. Rhetoric, you may have heard the term like rhetorical question, meaning something that you ask that's intended to make your person that you're asking the question to just think about something. A rhetorical question is not something that's meant to be answered. Rhetoric in general is things that are intended to make you think. They're a way of looking at sharing and communicating how you're thinking and to analyze and break down the way other people are thinking as well. Now let's take a look at the difference between argument and persuasion. The two are related but discrete. The idea of argument is to discover some version of the truth using evidence and reasons. And your purpose is to lead your audience, whoever it is you're talking to, towards a specific belief, conviction, and agreement that what you're saying is true or reasonable, or that there's something that they must do. Persuasion, on the other hand, uses argumentation, but the point is to change a point of view or to move people from a thought to an action. So one way to look at it is argue to discover some truth and persuade when you think you already know it. So rhetoric can be defined as the art of persuasion. Now the history of rhetoric, this concept of argumentation, specifically arguing using these 3 terms, ethos, pathos, and logos, began, as did many things from Western civilization, in Greece, which if you look at a map of Europe, you find Greece way down in here. Rhetoric was a concept that was first, that we know of, promoted by Aristotle. Now, Aristotle was a philosopher who studied under Plato, who was another famous Greek philosopher and teacher. And Aristotle famously is supposed to have taught Alexander the Great how to properly argue and perform a public speech in order to rule his government and control his armies. Now, what are the purposes and goals of argument? There's many different things that people use them for: to inform, to convince, to explore, to activate, which means to get people to do something, or sometimes just to think about things, to meditate, or in prayer, you kind of go over these arguments and you look at all of the evidence and all the different things that you're considering as part of that. So all of these ideas, informing is something when you're letting your audience know something they might not know, or to advise or let them know about something that exists. Convincing is trying to get other people to see your point of view. Exploring is a way of discussing something that you may not be that familiar with by reflecting on it, looking at problems, presenting and looking at solutions. And activating is getting people to actually go out and do something. And all of these are something that you would use your argumentation skills to do. Now, these next couple of ideas are things that we are going to use over and over again in AP English. So I want you to pay really close attention to this, bookmark it, take some notes. I'll come back to it as often as you need to until you really get these concepts if you need to look something up. The first thing is this idea of rhetorical context. This is kind of the environment in which the argument takes place, and we're going to do a whole nother presentation on that. For right now, I want to examine 3 different ways that you can look at how argument takes place. How do you use rhetorical skills? Ethos, logos, and pathos. And these 3 things form what's known as Aristotle's rhetorical triangle. And again, we'll discuss that in a later slide. Now, these words are all from the Greek, and if you think about them, you can probably sort of figure them out based on what you know from English. Logos is a logical appeal. Ethical, or ethos, is an ethical appeal that has to do with your own moral convictions, who you are and what you know. And pathos is the same root word as pathetic, meaning emotional, makes you feel something. That's an emotional appeal. Now, the rhetorical context and kairos, again, are something else that we're going to take a look at. But these 3 things, logos, ethos, and pathos, take place within the rhetorical context. Now, logos is the same Greek word where we get the word logic from. And these are appeals to an audience's intelligence. It might be to their common sense. Logos is going to use evidence. That's one of the key parts, some sort of evidence. The evidence might be what we think of as evidence, like numbers, facts, statistics. It might be polls and research that you gather. It might be precedents. It's things that have already happened to show that what's likely to happen again in the future. It might be something where you cite authorities on the topic. This might be people who are qualified to judge and give information, or anything where you're showing deductive or inductive reasoning. So as an argument is being put together, we're going to talk about logos when you're seeing appeals to logic and reason. You can see on this list some ways that people would use logos if they're making an argument. They might cite the traditional things that are done, commonly held beliefs to show what people have in common. They might allude to other things that are important to people, history, the Bible, great literature, show testimony, evidence, draw analogies, create metaphors, cite authorities or research, or again, precedents. And all of these would be appeal to that logic, to the logos. Now, ethos goes back to the idea of ethical, which gets to this concept of trust. Think like ethos and ego. It's where you're trying to show the audience that you know what you're talking about, that they should listen to you and they should trust you. And there's all different ways that you can do that. You're trying to establish your credibility, that is your believability with the audience. You're trying to establish trust. And you do this by showing what you already know, like your title, like I've been an English teacher for this many years, your position, I'm the sheriff of this town, I know what I'm doing, experience that you've had, this is what happened to me, I know what I'm talking about, or even sometimes testimonials of others. And all of these things are ways to show your audience that you know what you're talking about and that you can be trusted and believed. Now, there's all different kinds of ethical appeals. Again, you claim your authority, your position, your expertise. I know what I'm talking about. You can make a connection with your audience. You say, hey, you and I come from the same place. You can trust me. I've been through the same thing you've been through. You can kind of come clean. You can say, look, I know you might not trust me, but here's what I'm trying to do. Here's how I'm trying to help you. Here's my motive for talking to you today. You can demonstrate that you put in research time. Say, I've been studying this for this many lengths of time or years. You show a really carefully crafted or edited argument. You demonstrate that you know who the audience is. You say, I understand your troubles. I understand what you're thinking about, where you come from, and I respect that. And this, again, creates this kind of connection with the audience, so they're much more likely to listen to you and to trust you. You show this kind of concern and interest in communicating. You basically have to convince the audience that you, the writer, or if you're the speaker, are experienced, reliable, knowledgeable, and trustworthy. And that would be an ethical appeal or using ethos in your argument. And finally, we come to pathos, which is the same root word for emotion. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's where we get the word pathetic from. Now, we tend to use pathetic as something that's really awful, but it really comes from the idea of something that is to be pitied, something that makes you feel sorry for it. And using pathos is where you use emotional appeals in order to get the audience to feel something. Human beings are emotional as well as intellectual, and if you can tap into their emotions, they're much more likely to listen to you and to be convinced of your argument. And a writer engages pathos by their word choices. Using really specific words are going to get different kinds of reactions to people. They might use figurative language, all those things that we've been studying in literature and poetry. Lots of details, imagery to help people picture what's going on, and the tone of your argument. And all of this creates this sort of emotional connection with your audience, and that's using pathos in your argumentation. So here's a great example of rhetoric that just comes from someplace out on the street. So what you're trying to do is to get the audience, that is the drivers on the road, to slow down. Now, you've probably been through work sites and you've seen all the signs that say slow down, construction zone. Sometimes they try to use ethos and they'll say things like, construction workers here, or they'll use logos and say fines are doubled. But here's an appeal to pathos. You have this picture of this adorable young child, and it's using the word please, which connects with you and says, I'm asking you a favor. Slow down, my dad works here. And that word dad conjures up that family connection, that idea of emotions. And so you look at it, it's not suddenly like, hey, I'm in a real hurry, I got to get to school, I got to get to Harris Teeter, I'm on my way someplace. But, oh, wait, I have to be careful. It's not just some random construction worker. This is somebody's father, somebody's daddy, this little boy. So that's an appeal to pathos, to engage the audience's emotions in order to get them to do what you want them to do. So in conclusion, when you come back to class, be ready to look at some different examples from all different kinds of texts and things, and pictures and advertising and a couple other stuff, and determine if the appeal that's being made in this particular argument is being made based on ethos, logos, pathos, or some combination of that. So that's it. Those are 3 key terms, actually 4 if you talk about the idea of rhetoric in general, that you're going to be using throughout the entire course. Have a great evening, and we'll see you back in class.